Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video, just wanted to go over another interview that popped up with Naoki Yoshida, this time coming from Dualshockers. Feels like every week we've just had like an interview sprinkled here and there over the past several weeks since PAX East. Now, this is going to be an interview. I'm just going to read the title: Expansion, Improvements, Paladin, and more. I think that's the part people are looking forward to most. To be fair, it's not a whole lot of information that comes out of this one. A lot of them are things, can't answer this, I want people to speculate on this. So let's just go through some of the questions real quick. The first one just asks about what kind of love Paladin's going to be receiving. There's one big one that they hit the point on. It's that Paladin's magic defense is not very strong. He doesn't mean the stat. He means in general, Paladins don't perform well against magic wielding targets, and I think that's more reflected in the fact that a lot of their cooldowns and their blocking is ineffective entirely against bosses that have magical tank busters. So I don't think it's so much to call into question that, Paladin should be all-encompassing like Dark Knight, but Dark Knight has things to cover all fronts. It has the parry cooldown, it has its all-damage cooldowns, and it has its magic cooldowns, whereas blocking tends to be a lot less effective, as great as Sheltron and Bulwark is. So it looks like that's going to be a big thing. They want them to have a really strong defense against both physical and magical attacks. That's the only sort of detail we've gotten so far, and I hope there's a lot of other things I would like to see them change about Paladin. I hope that that's just one major point, but it is definitely a good one, especially with the way a lot of bosses have turned up in the more recent raid tiers. Now, as for this other one, another one is talking about tanks and healers, and how they are not releasing one. It's like we've all heard it like 10 times at this point. They talk more about the data that they have and encouraging people to play the roles and etc., etc. But he says ultimately there's no point in trying to force people to play a role they don't want to, which I kind of agree with, but adding incentive, or you don't want to force people. They want to prepare more content encouraging players to play tanks and healers. So we'll see where that actually ends up leading. We're quite curious about the identity of the Lady in Red. So this one's interesting because he says you'll find out in about 2 weeks. Apparently, the editor note says this interview was recorded about a week ago, which kind of puts 3.56 either at next Tuesday or next Thursday. I would assume it would be next Tuesday, but it could be Thursday as well. Who the heck knows? I'm expecting Thursday, March 23rd, to probably get a notification about a maintenance date about 3.56, but it looks like they're going to try to stick to their March date as close to the end of March as humanly possible. As for more expansion information, the main reason why they've shown so much about Doma and not shown a whole lot about Alamigo is because they just didn't have the assets to go along with the reveal outside of what they showed us with Rhalgr's Reach. And he also doesn't want to spoil 3.5 Part 2. So a lot of those buildings are prominent in the main scenario. They're key locations, and they're, without trying to spoil things, it's really hard to get the right assets to show us in the first place. Before the release of Stormblood, we will get a field walkthrough trailer. We've gotten that for pretty much everything prior, so no surprise there, and I'm really looking forward to that. How large and complex will Kugane be? Now, the last time we heard about Kugane, they revealed that Kugane will be our first city-state that is seamless, meaning that while it's probably about the same size as Ishgard, specifically here, and the other city-states, it's not split into 2 zones like everything else. So there's no loading screens. They've also made it so you can climb on top of roofs and traverse the roofs like a ninja would, of course, in that kind of culture. So he wants people to feel like it's a very free and open city, something that I feel is great for immersion when it comes to MMOs. You'd be surprised how climbable some of the buildings are, he even says, and looking at that should give you a rough idea of exactly what it is he means. As for talking about the discontinuation of the PS3 and moving towards the 64-bit Windows, he offered some clarification on what this actually means for the game, and he's offered this clarification before. The ability to traverse seamlessly within large areas is something that was already possible, implying the PS3 was not holding back that technical aspect of the game. We wanted to have dynamic changes in the scenery, which is why we included some of those loading screens, meaning that when you cross a zone line, you should feel like you're in a different area and you didn't just, gradually traverse into it. You just hit this brand new looking area, and they felt, I guess, it was better. It had nothing to do with the technical specs, apparently, or not completely related. It doesn't say it's not related at all. The improvements in the baseline hardware, the biggest boon is memory size. They can show more things on the screen at once. They just want to be able to show more, which is it's nice because it means they can do larger scale things. Hopefully, we'll see more about that. They also want to be able to travel faster on the map, planning various updates and upgrades. Looking forward to seeing what those actually end up being. A while ago, you mentioned the possibility of a crossover event with 15. We've heard about this before as well. There will not be one until after 4.0 launches. He gave us an idea of how long the Garo event took to set up. Apparently, the Garo event, with all the assets and the contracts and everything, it took about a year and a half in total to arrange the Garo event. So that's pretty insane. But if there's any sort of progress, they will definitely let the players know. They asked about Shirogane housing. You know, do you think the old housing zones will be barren? I think we all know the answer is no. If people can't get houses in Shirogane, they'll definitely take up the houses in the old housing areas. They talk about the length of the story for Stormblood. Says that it's probably about the same length in terms of the story as Heavensward's launch 3.0 story, but there's more voiced over scenes, so it might feel like it's longer. More voiced over scenes compared to Heavensward, which did have its fair share of non-voice scenes, so that's good to hear. Always better to have more voice acting work in a Final Fantasy XIV. Then there's speculation about Return to Ivalice. He wants people to be wondering, you know, it's not just an homage. You know, Ivalice itself it's not just an homage to the Final Fantasy Tactics / Final Fantasy XII universe that you guys know and love, and Vagrant story. So in terms of World Ivalice, whether or not it's connected to the realm of Final Fantasy XIV is a mystery, and something you'll have to enjoy while playing the scenario. All I can say is that I encourage people to get an idea from Final Fantasy Tactics and sort of brief themselves on that lore. You heard the man. Better go play it now. Then they talk about, this is actually exactly like the question from Twinfinite, where they ask what were the other candidates for the new job slot, and he will not say what it is. He just talks about the struggles of Red Mage and how Samurai was a pretty easy choice for what they were going to include. Moving into Stormblood's theme of liberation, they ask if tying front lines to the story of the expansion, and he just flat out said no. He says he actually he would love to do something like that, but he said that even with tying the Garo event to PvP, there are so many people that were just strictly against it, and they're just straight up adamant against participating. So incorporating that into the main story is more likely to piss people off than it is to be a rewarding experience for the player itself. Something I can kind of agree with in terms of, you know, you take a story that's been all PvE and you add a PvP section to it. It generally probably doesn't go over well with the people who liked it the way it was before. And he doesn't feel like it's worth experimenting in, and neither do I. After steering 14 for its stable rebirth, they ask him if he'd like to work on a new game. He has commented on this again recently as well, and he says it's not that he doesn't want to work on another game, but, you know, Final Fantasy XIV is basically his baby, and he knows there's so much work to be done in it, and he doesn't know if there's someone else who could take up his mantle, or even take up one of the two mantles he has, producer or director. But however, I mean, if people demand him to create another title, maybe Square Enix will move him forward onto a different project at some point. He says he won't die anytime soon, so he's got plenty of time to work on another title for Square Enix, but he really wants to see where the company wants to put him, and not so much what he wants to work on at the current moment. Very selfless man. It's like, I'm down, but like, I'll do whatever they need me to do. Seems like what he's basically saying. And he would be honored if people actually want him to be a director or a producer on another project. And then just one final message. He says that there's so much stuff they haven't talked about yet. The battle updates, the new actions that people are going to be getting, changes to PvP system changes, and a bunch of other stuff. They are doing a media tour, if you guys remember the French media tour that they did in the castle for Heavensward. And there are going to be Letter from the Producer lives coming soon. But for now, just enjoy patch 3.5 part 2. Find out who that lady in red is, and then we can start talking a little bit more about 4.0. So it was a nice little interview with a few key details strewn about here and there, including what appears to be confirmation that either March 28th or March 30th will indeed be patch 3.56. So if you guys enjoyed this, be sure to go over to Dualshockers and give their page some likes, some shares. You guys know what to do. Always support the writers of the articles, and don't just watch this video. Make sure you go to the original content that we are reporting on. Also, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share for this channel, because I'll be sure to share any and all of these that I managed to find with you guys. But anyway, I gotta go eat some dinner, so I will see you guys in the next video. And until then,